Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to today's episode of the Passion to Profits podcast. And in today's podcast episode, we're going to talk about creativity, and we're going to talk about you being creative. Now, right now, there probably is a mental shutter that's come down, and that's said to you, you're not creative. Everybody else in the world is creative, but you're not creative. You know, creative people are the people who write songs, who write books, who draw, who paint, who sculpt, but you are not creative. Now, I think when it comes to the word creativity and being creative, we think that is creative. But there's far more parts to being creative than just the arts. Because you're going to find in your passion business, you are probably not going to be writing songs. You might be maybe writing some books. You're not going to be painting or you're going to be drawing or sculpting or any of those things. But what you will be doing is you will be solving problems. And solving problems most times involves creativity. So just because you don't see yourself as being talented that way, that doesn't mean that you can't be creative. Now, what I'd say to you is that you don't need to go racing off to, buy books on creativity, how to be more creative, or that you need to watch videos or go to seminars. You have a wealth of knowledge already in there on the hard drive in your head. Because from birth to right now, you have gained a lot of experience. You've saw a lot of things. You've heard a lot of things. And you've experienced things. So right now what you can do is you can draw on the vast knowledge that you have in that hard drive in your head to come up with some creative solutions. Now the first thing I'd say to you is that when it comes to creativity, sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is that we're restricted. We don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the connections, the resources. Sometimes that can actually work in our favour. We think sometimes that restriction is a bad thing. Now, in my own case, an example of how I was actually creative by being restricted was something that happened to me when I was probably about 13. Now, Barry wasn't very clever at the time because of what he did. Because what I used to do was I used to lie in bed. And what I used to do was I used to have one of those metal darts, the dart boards. And what I would do is I'd lie on my bed and I would purposely throw the dart straight up towards the ceiling and wait until it had almost touched the ceiling and then move my head at the last second so that the dart could hit my pillow. Not very clever, and I'm lucky I still have got two eyes. But I used to do that sometimes when I was bored. And this one night I was doing it, the dart hit the pillow, fell down the side of the bed, and then as I reached down to find the dart, I found the carpet was wet and hot. I'm thinking to myself, why would this carpet be damp and hot? I realised then, of course, the dart went straight through the plumbing. So I pulled back the bed and sure enough, there was the dart stuck in the copper pipe and there was water spraying all over the place. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, my father had only done the plumbing a couple of weeks beforehand. So as you can imagine, as a teenager, the last thing I wanted to do was go racing off and tell him that I'd punctured his new plumbing and that my room was filling up with water. So Barry was just looking at this hole in this copper pipe. How do you fill it? So what I thought was, something, maybe I can put a screw in it. And that's what I did. I raced off into the shed, got a little brass screw, screwed it in. And then just to cover my tracks, I got a bit of a saw, chopped off the top of the screw, and then got a piece of white paint that my father had used for painting the ceiling and just dabbed it on the copper pipe. So it looked like it was just a paint blob on the copper pipe and that there wasn't actually a brass screw below it. So that worked. It did. It actually closed up the hole. And I think if I had had more time, if I had, resources and all those different things, I probably wouldn't have come up with as good a solution. But the fact that I was under pressure, panicking because the room was filling up with water and knowing I was going to be in big trouble, that thought came to me. Just simply get a screw, stick it in the hole. And it worked. Another example of how you can actually, or how someone else had actually worked with restrictions is, I remember hearing a story one time about a teacher who had given these kids a writing assignment. And what she simply said to them was, I want you to write a story about a girl called Sally or a boy called Tom and just write a story about them. And what she did was as the class was going on, she found there's a lot of kids actually chewing on their pencils, looking at the window, and there wasn't much writing going on. And then what she realised was that she actually had given them too broad of an idea. And that if she actually narrowed it down, made that character more specific, the kids could actually work better. So what she simply said was that little Sally and little Tom had a brother. Little Sally and little Tom liked walking into the local forest and they loved nature. And by simply just giving them these little prompts that they needed to follow along, it made it a lot easier for the kids to come up with the stories. because it's almost like being in a bowling lane. She had given them bumpers that they had to stay between. And you're going to find that having restrictions sometimes will allow you to come up with amazing ideas, or actually get you going in the right direction because you're restricted. So don't see the lack of money, the lack of knowledge, the lack of experience actually working against you. Sometimes it can actually benefit you, and sometimes you can really come up with some great ideas when you're restricted. Now, another thing you should do as well too, if you are maybe faced with a problem and you're trying to come up with a solution, is just observe what other people have done and just do what they did. You can be guaranteed that most problems we have been problems that someone else had before. And you're going to find that someone has probably written a blog post about it. They probably have made a video about it. They might have podcasted about it. But they've showed people how they actually overcome that problem. And basically what you simply do is you go off and you find their solution and then just use it in your own life. Now, you might find that maybe the solution that they're giving you isn't ideal. But what you can do is you can simply go and get a couple of different solutions, combine them together, make something original, and then use that to overcome your problem. So don't think that when it comes to creativity that you're looking at a blank page or you need to come up with a brilliant original idea. The ideas are already out there. When you think about it, like a pencil really is just wood, graphite, and somebody came along and stuck a rubber on the top. And each of those things combined together made that pencil. Again, if you look at a mobile phone, our mobile phones nowadays, our smartphones, are more than a phone. You've got a voice recorder, you have got maybe a notepad, you've got all these different apps. So you have all these different functions in the phone. So it's not just a phone anymore. So although you could look at an iPhone and say, oh, that's a wonderful creation and something original, basically all Apple did was just combined all these different things into a device and said, there you go. And that's what you can do as well too when it comes to coming up with creative ideas, is just see, can you combine other things that people have done, and then you can use that then for your solution. Another way of overcoming or being more creative is simply using the what if question. Now, this was something I used to use when I was writing my fiction, and it really helped me come up with characters and come up with storylines. So, for example, maybe if I was writing maybe a kid's book about a talking dog, I might think to myself, well, what if the dog could talk? What would happen to the dog? What would people think? And basically that little kind of what if prompted me to come up with ideas for the fiction book. Now, in your fiction book, in your solution that you're trying to come up with your problem, using that what if can really work for you, because as I said, it can help you not only now, but it can help you with problems that might come in the future. Sometimes as we're working along, we never think of the danger that could happen ahead. For example, maybe you're putting all your content in one platform and you assume that platform is always going to be there for your videos. You always assume that YouTube is always going to be there. Google is always going to be there. Facebook is always going to be there. But you've seen in the past, big businesses come and go. So you can't be guaranteed that maybe those businesses are going to stay there for eternity. So what you need to probably do is you need to ask yourself what if questions. What if Facebook closed down tomorrow? Where would I put my content? What if YouTube closed down? Where would I put my videos? What if I couldn't podcast anymore because maybe somebody else was using my room? Where would I podcast? So by asking yourself what if questions, sometimes you can actually prepare yourself for things that might happen, so that if YouTube ever goes or Facebook ever goes, or if you haven't the ability to use a room to do your podcast, you're already prepared for it. So you're already thinking ahead and coming up with solutions, and that can be a creative way too. Just simply thinking ahead. What if? What if I can't get in front of my audience? What if I lost my email list? What if I couldn't write ebooks anymore? What if I suddenly got a disability? And you're going to find that kind of limiting yourself that way might actually open up new opportunities that you mightn't have thought about before. I remember the great Dan Kennedy saying one time that when he was coming up with a business idea, he actually had a route A that he thought was going to be his route to success. And what he found over time was that something actually happened that blocked off that route A, and he couldn't get further. And what he had to do was he had to think, about this problem. How could he actually get around it? And by thinking and being creative in his thinking, he actually came up with a route B, and he found that his route B was actually more successful for him than route A. So by using things like what if, sometimes can actually maybe maneuver you into a better business, or maybe doing your content in a better way, or coming up with better ideas. So if you do find maybe sometimes you're just thinking to yourself, well, how do I get around this? Just think about what if. And another thing you can do is change your perspective. Sometimes when we aren't creative, it's basically because sometimes we get locked in our head. and we look at ourselves and say to ourselves, well, I'm Barry, and Barry isn't creative, so we can't come up with ideas. But sometimes actually taking yourself mentally out of your head and putting yourself in someone else's head, it'll allow you to be more creative. It'll allow you to change your perspective and see it in a different way. I remember the great Bob Proctor used to say sometimes that, when he was faced with a problem, what he used to do was he used to have the dinner table and he would imagine different historical characters sitting in chairs around the dinner table. And what he would do is when he was faced with a problem, he would simply get off his seat and then he would sit in the next seat and he'd think to himself, well, how would Earl Nightingale, what would he do with this problem? Or he might look at move on to the next seat and say, well, I'm now Napoleon Hill. How would Napoleon Hill overcome this problem? How would Andrew Carnegie overcome this problem? And by simply changing where he was sitting and changing the way he was thinking, he was looking at the problem from different angles. So sometimes changing your perspective, looking at your problem from somebody else's point of view, it might actually allow you to be more creative. Maybe taking yourself out of your head and maybe putting yourself in your followers' head today might allow you to come up with some creative ideas for your content. What is your follower looking today in content? What products are they looking for? What are they looking for you to say or do? And by taking yourself out of your head today and putting yourself in someone else's head, you're going to find that you're going to become more creative because you're changing your perspective and you're seeing things through their eyes. So try that out if you are, sometimes suffering with creativity or lack of creativity. It's sometimes because we have this mental block that we don't see ourselves as being creative. But by looking through someone else's perspective, it kind of opens up our brain and allows us to actually channel into that creativity so that we come up with solutions to our problems. Now, another thing you could do too is copy what someone else is doing. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why would I copy anything someone else is doing? Isn't that going to be copyright? But what you can do is you can copy what someone else is doing and then make it your own. Again, going back to the iPhone, they copied all those different apps, all those different features, and then put it in their own phone and made it their own way. So you can find sometimes that maybe if you come up with a solution, it can be maybe somebody else's solution, but you can put a spin on it. You could find that maybe the solution that you have found for your problem could be something that is in a completely different niche. It could be something that somebody else is using way over here and that people in your niche or business don't even realize it's there. Again, maybe something like, for example, maybe the big thing in AI at the minute. You could find that maybe nobody in your business is using AI, but you looking outside your niche and seeing how florists use it or seeing how some baker use it or someone else use it, and you realize, something, I could copy what that florist is doing, or I could copy what that baker's doing with that AI, or I could copy what that person's doing, take it into my business and then do my own unique spin on it. So again, you're not going back to the blank screen. You're not having to come up with ideas. You're basically taking what someone else has already done and making it your own, or combining a lot of these ideas together and then making something unique, but making your own, putting your own spin on it so that you're not actually copying because it's a totally unique idea. Sometimes maybe creating a creative space can help you as well too. Sometimes, again, like Bob Proctor moving around the chairs, sometimes if we kind of sit in a different place, we get more creative. Sometimes when you're sitting down maybe your laptop and you're just looking at the blank screen, your creativity doesn't come. But you find that maybe when you're in the shower or maybe you're taking the dog for a walk and then all of a sudden you've got idea after idea after idea coming to you. Now what I would recommend is if you do go walking or if you are in the car, do make sure you bring maybe a packet of post-it notes or a little notepad or something like that, because creativity can happen at any time and it usually happens when we don't want it to happen and when we don't have a pen and paper. So do make sure you have a pen and paper or you have your smartphone where you can take a note of the idea before it's gone, because you can be guaranteed that that idea will probably only be at the front of your mind for a second or two and then it's gone forever and you're never going to remember it. So make sure if you have a creative idea, get a pen and paper, get your phone out, even do a voice recording, but record that, because you can't be guaranteed that creativity is going to work away from what you normally work with. So by changing maybe where you're working, or maybe going back old school, just going to pen and paper. Sometimes when we have electronic devices, sometimes it leads to distraction, but sometimes it doesn't allow us to be more creative. You could find that maybe just getting a notepad and getting a couple of markers or a couple of coloring pencils or a couple of pencils and just doodling around. Just kind of, just doing the odd wee doodle sometimes can start opening up this creativity. We can ask ourselves a couple of questions and then all of a sudden we're away. And that's because we're kind of working in a different medium that we normally would do, or working in a different place. So try that out sometimes if you are lacking creativity. Go for a walk, sit in a different room, maybe just change the device you're working on, and see does that allow you to be more creative and have ideas coming to you. And then what I'd recommend you do is an easy way to come up with more creative solutions is to brainstorm by simply asking yourself, like, what's the worst content I could make today? You know, if I was going to create a video today and I couldn't think of a video today, I'm thinking, what'll I make? What I could probably ask myself is, what's the worst video I could make today? What's the shortest video I could make today? What's one point I could share with my audience today? And straight away there, I have got 2 or 3 different ideas for content just off the top of my head, without even actually sitting down long and writing it at all. So by asking yourself questions like, how can I maybe combine these 2 ideas together? How can I make this thing bigger, smaller, better, combined? You're going to find that it's going to give you an idea. So ask yourself questions like that. You know, questions like, what's the worst way I can do this? What's the best way I can do this? You know, how can I maybe argue with what I've already said before? How can I give a different opinion? How can I maybe take someone's content over here and this content over there and combine them together? Or how could I maybe take someone's product over here and someone else's product over there, combine them together and make my own unique product? So by simply sitting down with a pen and paper and just asking yourself those simple questions, you're going to find that it'll open the little floodgate, and then all of a sudden you'll have a lot of creative ideas coming to you. And then finally, take action. There's no point in you being creative if you're not taking action on your ideas. I think sometimes when we have these ideas of our own, we don't take action on them because we see them as our ideas. And if it's my idea, well then it's not going to be a great idea. But you're going to find that some of our ideas that we just throw away, that you think are no good, are sometimes some of our best ideas. Because the idea that you might think is terrible could be a brilliant idea to someone else. So don't be so dismissive of your ideas. Just throw them out there. Sometimes just test them and see that they work. And you could find that you could be wrong. I've found this many times. Sometimes when I come on here, maybe make a video or do a podcast, I say to myself, Barry, you've got a great idea. And then I go ahead, record the content, record the video, and then it flops. And then other days I have ideas that I just think, well, no one's going to be interested in this. No one's going to watch this video. You know, it's not going to go anywhere. But I still throw it out there because you never know. It could take off. And again, I found that with fiction books. Some of my best fiction books were just spur of the moment ideas that I just threw out there and that did well. Other things that I put my heart and my soul into and thought was really going to go well, didn't go well. So you have to see what other people think of your ideas. Don't dismiss your ideas. Take action on them. No matter how crazy they are, no matter how stupid they are, no matter you think they're not going to go anywhere. You never know. So take action on the ideas, because if you don't take action on the ideas that you've been given by this great brain of yours, your great brain will say, well, what's the point of me giving this person ideas because they're not taking action on them? I'm wasting my time, burning up brain cells here, giving them all this content, giving them all the ideas, all the tips and tricks, and then it's just a waste of time. So don't do that to your brain. If your brain is coming up and giving you solutions, note them down at least, and then look at the best ones, but do take action on them because you never know where it's going to go next. So hopefully this podcast episode has helped you, because as I said, we sometimes see ourselves as not creative, but I think that's because we confuse all the arts as being creative, but there are other parts of life where you can be creative. So hopefully this podcast episode has helped you out. Again, as always, if you have any questions or if you have any comments at all, please feel free to leave them below the content. And if you get into the show notes, you're actually going to find the new podcast book series that we have on the Kindle store. And what we've been doing this past couple of weeks is we have been taking specific podcast episodes and then writing Kindle books about the topic. So if you'd like to know about the Kindle book series, click on the link in the show notes. It'll take you directly over there. And as always, have a lovely day. Take care. Bye-bye.